Thanks very much. First question, I guess, can everybody hear me okay? Yep, and hopefully everyone's still awake. It's getting late, and I know that Emma, who's next, and myself are between you and drinks, so I'll try and keep it short and sharp. I'm only going to aim to talk for about 10 or 12 minutes, and then hopefully have some questions afterwards. Just a few key messages from me. So first and foremost, we started a process about 3 years ago of reviewing the Yachtmaster syllabus. Unfortunately, due to a staff departure and then COVID, we've been delayed for about 2 years. We're about 2 years behind the program, in fact. That process is now fully underway, and the first stage of that will be complete by next year. Our motivation for doing that is basically we want to be teaching navigation, not the history of navigation. So very much aligned with what Ajit was speaking about earlier. The principles that we're following are those that came out of the STCW review that was published last year, but actually we've been working on it previously. We've had electronic navigation in the syllabus for 22, 23 years. We've had electronic training chart plotters for 21 years, and various other devices, if you like, as teaching aids, but we still don't feel that we've got the right answer yet. And I guess most importantly, we don't have the balance right. So as you can see there on the left, paper, pencils, chart plotters, very conventional, traditional means of navigation. And that's on the left. On the right, we've got a chart plotter screen. At the moment, our teaching at Yachtmaster, and in fact even at day skipper level, the next level down, is still very much rooted in the same realms as the MCA's training, which is, broadly speaking, 80% traditional navigational techniques, 20% electronic. We know that's wrong, and that needs to change. It needs to change quite quickly. We are working with UKHO, we're working with the MCA, we're working with Royal Institute of Navigation to make sure that our syllabus is in line with the direction of travel of the review of electronic aids to navigation, and with whatever the final solution is that UKHO comes up with as far as electronic charts. So it's going to take quite some time to change the culture. That's our biggest challenge, but that's the journey we've embarked on. So very, very broadly speaking, on the left there, you can see old school, lots of work on paper, lots of manual calculations of tidal heights and tidal streams, lots of reliance on interpreting a synoptic chart, so on and so forth. And on the right, you can see what we're looking to bring in. We're not changing the syllabus very much. What we're changing is the sources where that information is obtained from. We're not changing navigational techniques very much. We're using the same techniques, but using different tools to solve those problems. So it's not rocket science, and all we're really doing is catching up with where technology's been for some time. The challenge we've got at our end, for most of you, you're working in the world of ECDIS, which is great. You've got an international standard that's widely understood, widely accepted, and very well established. Below the level of ECDIS, no standard exists. There is no standard for electronic charts. There is no standard for the hardware that they use, and there is no standard for the training that supports that. By the way, that's changing because we're removing paper in theory within 3 years' time. So we do have quite a challenge ahead of us to develop a new syllabus, to develop new means of training and delivering that, but without actually knowing what the product is that's going to be available. So a little bit of a challenge there. But we're up to it, and that's where we're going. So your crews that are training up, that are moving on from RYA to RYA tickets and subsequently to MCA tickets, not to Belgian tickets, one would hope. They're going to need to sort of change their mindset, and it's important that you, as captains, are helping them on that journey. We're not getting rid of paper. We're not going to suddenly stop teaching paper, but the weighting, the amount of training on paper, the amount of manual calculations is going to shift, and it's going to be much more about using all the other tools available, and importantly understanding how to use them properly, what their risks are, what their faults and failings are, and how to mitigate against those. So watch this space. We'll start communicating that fairly openly at our instructor conference in February of next year, and then that will take about 2 to 3 years to roll out thoroughly across the board. We're talking about 10,000 instructors across 58 countries that we need to get this to. And our challenge isn't actually changing the mindsets of the end user. Our challenge is actually changing the culture of our instructors so that they are not teaching what they're comfortable with, they're teaching actually an up-to-date syllabus. And interestingly, talking to Adjit, he's seen exactly the same experience in colleges at MCA training levels as well. It wouldn't be a conference without talking about Brexit, would it? I don't think. So I've talked to some of you I've talked to frequently over the last 4 years, really, since the 4.5, nearly 5 years since the Brexit referendum, and in particular over the last 20 months or so since Brexit became a reality. And I think it's fair to say that those 5 words probably describe what you've seen and what I've seen and what everybody's experienced. There's been an awful lot of that. In reality, in terms of RYA qualifications, there's been almost no change. I say that with a few caveats. In Spain, for example, having written to every European country immediately after the referendum and seeking to engage with every single one of them about their acceptance or non-acceptance of RYA qualifications post-Brexit, we received not a single response. On the 28th of December 2020, so 3 days prior to Brexit, the Spanish authorities issued a directive essentially saying that they would no longer accept any RYA qualifications anyway. In fact, they didn't use RYA, they said UK issued qualifications, either for leisure purposes or for commercial purposes. Not terribly helpful, especially seeing we've been writing to them, seeking some sort of engagement and getting none. It certainly didn't help the industry in Spain. We didn't go and knock on the Spanish authorities' doors. We worked with the industry within Spain, and we provided information. We worked with the MCA. In fact, the MCA did a great job in going direct to the Spanish authorities. But actually, I think where the real success lay was the local industry, the maritime sector within Spain, going direct to their maritime authorities and lobbying, using a lot of the information we were able to provide them, economic impact information, the impact that was going to have not only on the boating community, but local restaurants and hotels and tourism and so on and so forth. By May, they rolled back that directive for all leisure qualifications, so they completely reversed their decision. And by the end of June, they'd rolled back most of that directive as it applied to the commercial world, as far as RYA qualifications are concerned. That was the only country that came out and openly said via legislation that they were no longer accepting RYA qualifications. Now, don't get me wrong, not all countries in Europe do accept RYA qualifications, and that's absolutely fine. No issue with that. It's their legal right and obligation to make their own decision on that, and we absolutely respect that. There still are countries that accept RYA tickets for various things, and the one that had openly said they wouldn't has now rolled that back. I put the word up there, the words rumour mongering. That's probably the biggest issue we've had And I'll talk about Italy in particular, where I've had, particularly over the last 12 months, numerous people contact me to say, I've heard that the personal watercraft safety certificate is no longer being accepted by the Italian authorities. And on each and every occasion, I've also had feedback from PWCs, I've had feedback from various of you within the industry, and on each and every occasion where we've asked that to be chased back, there's not been a single word written that we're aware of that states that. All of that has come about from room talk, whispers, rumour mongering. I suspect probably some misinformation by, I wouldn't like to speculate who, but certain body within the industry that has a vested interest. So please, if anyone knows for a fact that that's not right and they've got a bit of paper that says no longer accepted, I would love to see it, because then we can take that to the Italian authorities and engage with them. The fact is that, and I'll talk about the PW certificate, there is no obligation on any country, any national maritime authority to accept that for use of super yachts. They accept it out of the kindness of their hearts, basically. The history of that, as I'm sure you're all aware, it came about because of accidents in the industry and in an effort to establish an industry, voluntary industry standard. That whole principle that I think we heard about from the Italian Yachtmaster, which was, you know, this idea of being responsible for your own destiny and setting your own standards. And yeah, I think the PW Safety Certificate is a great example of success of that. So that is still being accepted in all other countries, to the best of my knowledge. I'm only aware of it twice having been refused. Once of those was in Croatia about 6 years ago, and when we dug into that, it wasn't the certificate that was the problem, it was the antisocial behaviour of the riders using those PWs, the guests, the yacht guests. So important to make sure we're dealing with facts, not with rumours, and certainly not perpetuating rumours. So we've had, I guess, 3 phases of Brexit, to put it really simply. The pre-Brexit, where we did endeavour to engage with European countries, and in fairly typical form, their authorities didn't engage with us. And again, they're not obliged to. We're not a statutory body. We don't hold the same authority as a regulator. We don't pretend to, but we did hope to have conversations, which we weren't able to. So we spent a good 3 years really trying to set some groundwork, and that proved not possible. Even with the UK government, that was quite challenging given the big ticket items they were looking at, and we're quite small fry in the bigger scheme of things. The short term, last year, this year, we did initially see the issues I talked about in Spain, for example, and a lot of confusion. That has largely died down, and there seems to be sort of a status quo, if you like. And my view of the longer term is that we will continue to see the same issues we've seen for the last 30 years in boating in Europe, which is pockets, usually with a particular local authority, Greece, Italy, and France, wherever it happens to be, but generally not on a national level. And we'll tackle those as we always have. And still, I'm firmly of the view that the best way of doing that is using the industry, the local industry, to make that direct approach to the relevant authorities. It doesn't look terribly good for an organisation with the word royal in its title to go knocking on the door of a national maritime authority requesting something. What does work is credible people within the industry on the ground in the relevant country acting as go-betweens and using their contacts. For some of your crew, they will have experienced some quite horrendous delays in certificates, receiving their certificates, certificates of competence and instructor certificates over the last particularly 18 months, predominantly due to COVID, but also then due to a massive, unprecedented spike in demand for qualifications. So we've issued over the last 18 months something like 3.5 times more certificates than we would normally have done in any given year. At the same time, we lost a number of staff, only 8 people worked in that department. At the same time, it was decimated not once, not twice, but 4 times by COVID. So we've really been on the bones of our knees with that. The department's been bolstered now, it's got more staff, we've invested quite heavily in that. And what we're working on now is actually digitising most of those workflows. So hopefully over the next 12 to 24 months you'll see some significant change. But those delays are now gone, they're back down to a couple of weeks turnaround. I can only apologise for the inconvenience that's caused for some of you and for your crew. Trinity House, only a moment on this, but this is a scholarship that exists. We started it about 5 years ago now with Trinity House, the General Lighthouse Authority in the UK, and it's a scholarship that's available only to UK citizens. You and I wouldn't be eligible for it, sadly, being an Australian citizen. But it is extremely successful, and we're getting about 10 to 12 scholarship awardees each year. The £30,000 is spread across all of those candidates. It's not £30,000 per candidate, but what it's doing is proving to be a great springboard for people that would really like to get into the commercial industry but don't quite have the funds themselves to fund that initial step. So if you Google Trinity House, RYA Yachtmaster, it'll pop up and give you all the information you need. And last but not least, just a reminder that the Personal Watercraft Safety Scheme is there. Over 380 yachts are using that scheme at the moment. It's still proving very, very successful. And we, next month, will be presenting a proposal, which I'm sure many of you will be pleased to hear about the possibility of virtual inspections being made on alternating years. We won't do them every year, but through COVID, we did move to virtual inspections, so video, two-way communication between the vessel and our inspector, and it's worked quite well. So what we're looking at is alternating years. And where a vessel has a very clean inspection, then its reward for the following year is that its inspection will be virtual, not having to coordinate an inspector to fly out and physically check that. There'll still be an inspection, but it won't be physically an inspector on site, which should reduce cost, reduce inconvenience, and so on and so forth. So that's it, short, sharp and sweet from me, but any questions at all?